Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Constructing Legends with the Violet Howler, a literary analysis of Voltron Legendary Defender. Before I start getting into analyzing the characters and themes of the series, I want to talk about something that I don't see talked about very often anymore, but is essential to understanding my approach to looking at the series. Just how much thought and effort there is behind even the smallest details of the show's visuals and dialogue. Voltron Legendary Defender manages to pack a huge amount of information into the most seemingly irrelevant throwaway lines and background designs, and no detail is ever forgotten. From the consistent reuse of minor characters, to the breadcrumbs of dialogue and background details that give viewers that are willing to look for them a treasure trove of world building. No visual or audio detail in the series is ever wasted or included without purpose, to the point where we can tell that scenes in the final season were cut or altered well after production was finished because of how disconnected the individual details were from the overarching plot. So for today's episode, we're going to be discussing how consistent the show's attention to detail is, and the disconnect between the individual details in Season 8 and the story being presented to us.
Are you guys serious? We're navigating by cave poetry now?
One of the easiest demonstrations of how much detail there is in the show is how often major characters appear as background cameos long before they actually have any lines. Unnerva cameos in the background when Shiro sees glimpses of the Black Lion's origins in Season 2, Episode 7, Space Mall, a whole 13 episodes before we learn about how she became Hagar. Multiple Galran officers that have notable roles in Season 3, like General Rott and Commander Throck, appear in several background shots aboard Zarkon's command ship over the course of the first 2 seasons. And Garrison pilot Ina Leifsdottir, who won't be relevant until halfway through Season 7, appears in the background of the very first episode of Season 1 as one of Lance Hunk and Paige's classmates. But even minor characters that audiences expected to be one-offs that would never appear again are consistently brought back. From bringing back the random nameless bounty hunter that Paige and Matt fought in Season 4 for a guest appearance in Season 8, to the fact that Season 7 brought back the exact same druid that Keith fought all the way back in Season 1, and even gave the guy a name rather than create a whole new character from scratch. And the crew even does this with nameless background extras, like that one kid from the Space Mall being in the audience of the team's propaganda shows in Season 4, Episode 4, The Voltron Show, and on the front lines of the Rebel Coalition's attack in Season 4, Episode 5, Begin the Blitz. Or that one nameless Galra commander who was responsible for Shiro's abduction at the start of the series, showing up again later to demonstrate what happened to him after he failed to catch the Blue Lion. This reuse of designs even extends to technology and weapons in addition to characters. From Hagar's experimental weapon, the Komar, from Seasons 1 and 2 that can drain an entire planet's life force being incorporated into her Altean mechs in Seasons 7 and 8, to the orbital long-range laser turrets known as Zyforge cannons from Season 4, and the radiation-deflecting Omega Shield station from Season 6 being components of Sendak's plan to destroy Earth in Season 7. And even the terminology used has a clear amount of thought put into it. Not only do the writers go out of their way to make the science talk actually sound plausible by referencing real scientific concepts.
What?
Yeah, I noticed that the repeating series of numbers the aliens are searching for looks a lot like a Fraunhofer line.
Frown who?
It's a number describing the emission spectrum of an element.
Maybe they're a frequency.
A quantum signal that broadcasts other frequencies to go to? It's too high. These are more than 3,000 gigahertz.
Invert it.
What?
For every wave we receive, there's only partial transmittance, right?
Oh, right, yeah. So we figured the transmission coefficient.
And tune for the frequency of the reflected waves. Is that some kind of supermassive star?
No. Unbelievable, it's a white hole!
Whoa, take that, theoretical physics.
Wait, what's a white hole?
Well, unlike a black hole, which has massive gravity that sucks everything in, a white hole is an opposite body that shoots massive amounts of energy out from an unknown source.
But they also developed a unique system of time measurements instead of hand-waving that every planet in the universe measures time the exact same way that Earth does, like other sci-fi series sometimes do.
A few more ticks.
How much better do you think he's gonna get in a few more ticks?
And what exactly is a tick? You know, a time slice.
Like a second?
What is a second?
Like this.
I'm not sure. I think ticks are bigger. Karan, do you have a ticker?
Right here, Princess.
I think ticks are a little slower.
Instead of minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years, the humans gradually shift toward using doboshes, vargas, quintets, movements, phoebes, and decaphoebes. And the series does consistently show that these fictional units of time are not all one-to-one with their Earth counterparts. Season 1, Episode 6, Taking Flight, establishes that ticks are longer than seconds by having the characters actually compare the two, and in Season 1, Episode 2, Some Assembly Required, Karan mentions how his food will have the humans
forming Voltron 6 times a movement!
The same way that the audience might say 7 days a week, which indicates that there are 6 quintets in a movement, something supported by the fact that Karan mentions in The Voltron Show that the Paladins are performing
6 nights a week and twice on the Astral Complex!
And Season 1, Episode 10, Collection and Extraction, indicates that a year is smaller than a decaphoebe. Because Season 1, Episode 1, The Rise of Voltron, indicates that Karan and Allura were in stasis for exactly 10,000 years. But when the security alarm in Collection and Extraction brings up Shiro's prisoner ID when the team gets caught hacking a Galra ship, the formatting indicates that he was captured by the Empire in the 9,875th decaphoebe after the beginning of the war. On top of all this, the series even takes details that are seemingly inconsequential to the overall story and making them important elements of the plot. The eccentric inventor Slav's fixation on alternate realities in Season 2 is initially presented as just a funny gag and an expression of his OCD. But then in Season 3, the existence of alternate realities and how they diverge from the one the main characters live in becomes a major element of both the overall plot and the backstory of the Voltron Lions, as well as a key component of the villain's plan in the final season. And the writers continually had the Galra officers throwing around the phrase Vrepit Sa as a salute.
Vrepit Sa, sir. Vrepit Sa. Vrepit Sa.
Which they could have easily gone without explaining and left audiences to interpret as a general alien way of saying yes sir or something to that effect. But then they dedicated a whole episode to having Hunk learn that the phrase has actual significance in Galran history and culture, which he then uses to convince a bunch of bickering Galra officers to work together with both each other and with Voltron by appealing to the history and tradition that the phrase represents. But on top of those kinds of background details, the show also packs a ton of world building into the dialogue and visuals that has often been overlooked. For example, the show has many little tidbits sprinkled throughout the series that paint an incredibly detailed picture of the structure of how the main villain's faction, the Galra Empire, operates. Collection and Extraction establishes that quintessence is the main fuel source of the Empire, and Zarkon established 3 episodes prior that the Galra have been acquiring quintessence by mining on the planets they've conquered. Season 3, Episode 7, The Legend Begins, revealed that quintessence was discovered when an inter-universe rift was opened on the Galran home planet Dibazal. And as we saw in prior episodes, the Galra Empire uses quintessence for not just fuel, but electricity, weapons, and medical care. So when their home planet was destroyed, it cut off the Galra from their most crucial resource, leaving them with just the reserves they already had in storage. Something which is confirmed by the Galra medics overseeing Lotor's birth during flashbacks from Season 8, Episode 2, Shadows.
Sire, we're gonna have to face the fact that our quintessence supplies are finite. The Empire cannot continue to run on what we have. And you and the Empress, without it, you'll...
So after Zarkon wages war against planet Altea as revenge for the destruction of Dibazal, the Galra Empire continued expanding in order to acquire enough quintessence to maintain their infrastructure. Explaining what Ulaz said in Season 2, Episode 3, Shiro's Escape, about how
we thought expanding the Galra Empire would bring stability.
But expanding the Empire's territory means that now they need even more quintessence and other resources to maintain control over all the new planets they've conquered, which leads to even more conquest, which leads to needing more resources, and on in a never-ending loop. And because of the constant expansion and wars, the bulk of the resources the Empire harvests from its territories go towards the military, rather than other things that a society needs to function like infrastructure, education, or the arts. We even get a glimpse of this impact on Galran culinary traditions in Space Mall, where the food produced by Galra restaurant owner Vrepit Sal is shown to be bland at best and unappetizing at worst until Hunk takes over his kitchen. And this constant expansion also provides a perfectly sound justification for why so many Imperial ships and bases we see in the show are staffed by robots. Sure, the out-of-universe explanation is that it's so our heroes can blow up enemy ships without the messy moral dilemmas that killing equal numbers of flesh-and-blood soldiers would involve, but it's logical from a purely in-universe standpoint as well. Because once the Empire gets big enough, it will eventually require more ships and bases to maintain than it has Galra citizens to run them. Having robotic sentries performing most of the functions of a ship allows the Galra to make the most effective use of their organic soldiers without putting as much of a strain on their resources. Because a crew made up almost entirely of robots with only a handful of Galra officers only needs food and medical supplies for a handful of people, making such warships cheaper to run than a ship crewed by hundreds of living beings who all need their own supplies and wages. And all of this explains why we see so few Galra civilians in the show, compared to how Avatar: The Last Airbender went out of its way to show Fire Nation civilians living mundane lives on multiple occasions. Because even with sentries alleviating some of the pressure, the Galra are consistently depicted in the series as a warrior culture, along the same lines as the Mandalorians in Star Wars, the Klingons of Star Trek, or the Sontarans from Doctor Who. So even with robots reducing the push to have every Galra serve in the Imperial fleet, there would still be a cultural push to at the very least contribute to the war effort in some way. And there's also multiple details that indicate the Empire's conquest and occupation of inhabited planets didn't always look like the enslaved labor of native populations like with the Balmerans and Alkari. In the flashbacks to Shiro's time in the arena from Season 1, Episode 3, Return of the Gladiator, the arena audience aboard Central Command is almost exclusively made up of non-Galra. Not dressed in tattered uniforms like the prisoners, but wearing unique, clean, lavish clothing, conveying that these people are not only all watching the Gladiator matches willingly, but were permitted to do so aboard Zarkon's own command ship. This, along with the existence of the Space Mall, indicates the existence of a thriving non-Galra middle class with a peaceful, mundane lifestyle in Galra territory with a high standard of living. Not only that, but the design of the Galra themselves shows that the Galra as a species are physically not the same people as when the war began. Because in all the flashbacks to Galran civilization before Zarkon's conquest of the universe began, the designs of Galra soldiers all had the same basic shapes and were generally pretty consistently indicative of reptilian biology. But in the present day, there is a notable variety of traits featured among the various Galra commanders depicted in the show. And when you look closely, nearly all of the modern-day Galra designs feature traits from the previous non-Altean Voltron paladins. Throck, Hepta, and Morvok all have the same kind of nose shape, facial markings, and large manta ray-like ears that the original Blue Paladin, Blates, has. Krolia and Aksha both have colored irises and white diamond-shaped pupils just like Trigel, the original Green Paladin, who even has horns that run toward the back of her head like Aksha does in Season 7. Sendak and Prorok have fur and single-lobed ears like the original Yellow Paladin Gurgan and his people do, and there are multiple Galra characters in the present day like Ladnok and Kolovon who combine traits from more than one of the original Paladin species. So when you take all of that together, the design details of the show imply that the present-day Galra are hybrids of 4 out of 5 of the original Paladin species. And given the fact that both Sendak and Throck still consider themselves to be pure Galra, these details imply that the Galra Empire's national identity has shifted over the millennia in order to account for that. Because according to Sendak's hologram in Season 7, Altea was the only planet that resisted the Galra enough that the Empire chose to destroy the planet altogether. Which means that after the deaths of their respective leaders, the home planets of the original Paladins surrendered and were absorbed into the Galra Empire, rather than being destroyed like Altea was as Allura believed in the first episode. And since the 4 different species had already been mingling for years beforehand, they just kept blending over time as the Empire expanded until they became one identity. To the point where Zarkon can't afford to restrict his recruitment and rhetoric to only target those who are completely unblended without alienating the overwhelming majority of his armies. So instead, he would have had to essentially move the goalposts of what counts as pure Galra in order to get his subjects on board with his Galra supremacist rhetoric. This consistent level of thorough and meticulous attention to detail is how fans like Team Purple Lion have been able to identify where changes were made to the final season as a result of World Events Productions meddling. because the surface level plot being presented to us is saying one thing, while the visuals and other details are telling us another. For example, the second half of the season tells us that Lotor died in the Rift, which blatantly contradicts that Season 8, Episode 6, Genesis, shows us that he's aware enough inside his mecha to recognize Allura and hold himself back from hurting her because he still cares about her despite their falling out in Season 6. But even if you ignore that, the shot of Unnerva looking at what we're led to believe is his melted corpse contains two notable details. The melted bits of his body keeping him tethered to the inside of his mecha look just like the withered branches of the dead tree that Allura healed on Earth in Season 8, Episode 1, launch date. And through the entire shot, you can see glowing golden purple flecks of light floating up from Lotor's body, exactly like the ones that were emanating from his parents when they came back from the dead after their own dunk in the Rift in The Legend Begins. The characters explicitly reject investigating the Altean colony because of the potential dangers of the Quantum Abyss, yet Genesis shows that they apparently made the journey entirely off-screen without issue, and never once acknowledges that they did so. In Season 8, Episode 11, Uncharted Regions, the characters talk about building a thorium ray to use against Unnerva, but we never get to see it built or used. And at the start of the episode, Unnerva tells Merla that the Paladins knowing her plans is an advantage rather than a problem, echoing how Lotor spoke in Season 3, Episode 3, The Hunted, about how the new roster of Paladins being able to form Voltron was
an opportunity,
and then proceeded to use Voltron to achieve something that he wasn't able to do himself, implying that Unnerva's plans also rely on her using Voltron to accomplish something that she's unable to do on her own. But then her plan turns out to just be abandoning her universe for an alternate reality where her husband and son are still alive, which Voltron was ultimately irrelevant to and contributed nothing that she could not obtain without them. And when the Paladins chase Unnerva through multiple collapsing realities, we can clearly see the portal to the next one closing on them, leaving our heroes trapped in the void between universes. Yet at the end of the episode, they suddenly show up right where Unnerva is with no scenes or dialogue explaining how they got there or what they experienced. The fact that these discrepancies break the show's previously consistent streak of meticulous attention to detail serves as further proof that the season that we got was edited at the last minute in order to change the story being told, as I outlined in my previous video. And because of those discrepancies, we are able to use all those unaddressed details in Season 8 caused by world events meddling to piece together what the production team actually planned. There was so much time and effort put into making every detail of this show fit together and build up the characters, world, and story of the series even when it's not part of the main narrative. And it's important to recognize that when analyzing the series, because the moments where the details are saying one thing while the surface level narrative says another are incredibly useful in identifying when a plot beat has been removed or the direction of a storyline altered from the direction the writers were intending to go in. And because it's also worth recognizing just how much passion and thought went into this series to add so many little touches that make the world and characters feel more fleshed out within the set number of episodes that the writers had to work with. Thank you all so much for watching. As usual, if you have any thoughts, observations, or counter-arguments about anything I've said here in today's video, feel free to share in the comments below. Like always, be sure to click subscribe if you want to be notified the next time I upload, and I'll see you all back here again on October 25th for my next video.